Congratulations, you're officially a Sith. Not to ruin the moment or anything, but spoiler alert, you're not going to make it. In this video, we're diving deep into what it actually felt like to live as a Sith, and you'll experience it all like you're walking in their boots. So grab a snack, get comfy, and let the galaxy fade around you. And drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. It's always cool seeing where Star Wars fans are watching from across the galaxy. And if you end up enjoying these stories, consider subscribing. It helps a lot. Now let's begin. You trained your whole life to be a Sith, specifically Darth Maul, which sounds pretty cool until you realize that your big moment ends with you getting sliced in half. Let's take a step back. From a young age, you didn't have much of a childhood, at least not like most people. Forget playing games or chilling with friends. Your entire world was about learning to fight, to use the Force, and to become the perfect weapon. It was intense, and you didn't have time to complain. After all, you were meant to be the ultimate Sith apprentice. Then came the day to prove all that training mattered. You faced Obi-Wan Kenobi, a Jedi who seemed calm, but was definitely no pushover. And then, well, you got cut in half, literally. Not the career highlight you imagined. Here's the weird part. You survived. Most people would have called it quits, but you somehow dragged yourself through dark tunnels, fueled by anger and pure stubbornness. You got yourself some robot legs because why not? Now you're half Sith, half cyborg, trying to figure out how to walk and fight again. I mean, if you asked me, I'd probably be asking for a refund on that apprenticeship by this point. Adjusting to new cybernetic legs was no walk in the park. Imagine learning to walk again, but with metal limbs. It's tricky, frustrating, and probably involved a few faceplants. But you managed, because giving up isn't really part of the Sith curriculum. Meanwhile, your Sith master wasn't exactly checking in. Sith are known for being loyal to their power, not their apprentices. Once you were broken, Palpatine moved on without missing a beat. Without that Sith support, you went in a different direction, the galaxy's criminal underworld. Instead of wielding Sith power openly, you started running a gang, dealing with crime lords, power struggles, and all the dirty politics that come with it. It wasn't the Sith warrior life you trained for, but it was a way to keep your power and survive. Running a gang meant constant vigilance. You had to watch your back, deal with betrayals, and prove yourself in a new kind of battle. You trained your whole life to be a deadly Sith warrior, only to be cut in half, lose your legs, and wind up as a crime boss with robot legs. It's not exactly the glamorous path you imagined. Now, if you were in Darth Maul's shoes, or metal legs, I guess, what would you do? Would you keep fighting, or would you throw in the towel and finally take that sabbatical everyone talks about? Just something to think about while you imagine how tough it is to be a Sith with half your body missing. Before you were the red guy spinning a double-bladed lightsaber like a blender on full speed, you were just a kid from Dathomir. Not exactly the kind of place you put on your travel list. Your early years were spent with the Night Sisters, a clan of witches who saw the Force as something you could bend and shape with spells rather than just push or pull. One day, you'd be collecting bizarre swamp mushrooms that smelled like old socks. The next, you'd be chanting in circles around a cauldron, learning spells to heighten your senses or cloak your presence. It wasn't exactly a normal childhood, but it did teach you two things fast: how to keep your balance on slippery ground, and how to blend into shadows better than a ninja on a blackout night. Family life wasn't picture perfect either. Your mum, Mother Talzin, ran the Night Sister coven and expected you to be sharp, always. If you messed up a spell or took too long gathering ingredients, you weren't grounded. You were banished from the circle until you earned your spot back. That kind of tough love meant you learned resilience early on. You got used to being tested, pushed, and sometimes left out in the swamp until you proved you could handle the next challenge. Then came the day Darth Sidious showed up. Imagine a stranger handing you a ticket to the big leagues. One minute you're a Night Sister trainee, the next you're on a transport to the Sith Academy, leaving Dathomir's bogs behind. Sidious had his own training style, raw Force drills and lightsaber sparring until your arms felt like jelly. Instead of gathering swamp herbs, you were drilling stances, learning to focus anger into power. Switching from magic and moss to hardcore Sith training meant relearning pretty much everything. You went from weaving spells with your hands to blasting enemies with Force lightning and Force pushes. Night Sister subtlety gave way to Sith aggression. You traded hush-be-quiet lessons for strike now, strike hard orders. It wasn't a smooth handoff, Some nights you'd catch yourself thinking in chants when you needed to think in attack patterns. Balancing both worlds was like learning two languages at once, then having to switch mid-conversation without getting tongue-tied. Still, you picked up speed fast. Those years of quick reflexes from avoiding giant bog creatures translated into acrobatic moves with your lightsaber. Your Night Sister background added a hint of unpredictability. Enemies never quite saw your style coming. But there was a downside, being raised to expect betrayal. The Night Sisters were all about looking out for yourself first, and the Sith took that idea to a whole new level. Sidious expected you to be loyal, but only as long as you were useful. And that brings us to the big fight with Obi-Wan Kenobi. After all that shifting between magic and mayhem, you stepped onto that ship expecting to prove your worth. You didn't plan on getting sliced in half, but you did, missing half your body, thinking, well, that escalated quickly. Looking back, it's clear your background shaped every twist in your path. The Night Sisters taught you to use the environment, shade, sound, surprise, while the Sith taught you to harness rage and ambition. Neither approach on its own would have gotten you from swamp child to half-robot crime boss. It was the mashup of swamp magic grit and Sith discipline that made you who you are. So that's Maul's backstory in a nutshell, from bog spells to saber drills, from gathering mushrooms to fighting Jedi, from Night Sister rituals to Sith conspiracies. It wasn't a straight line or an easy ride, but it set you up for everything that came next. Your survival, your upgrades, and your place in the galaxy's underworld. So you started a new life, diving into the criminal underworld, and running a gang, as I said, is a whole new world. The whole leadership thing requires skills that Sith training didn't really cover. You have to be a motivator, a planner, sometimes a diplomat, all while keeping the fear factor alive. You still want to be feared, but you also need people who will actually follow you, not just because they're scared, but because you've earned their respect, or at least their grudging acceptance. It's a balancing act. Meanwhile, your infamous reputation as Darth Maul still gets you some respect, or at least wariness from others. You realise that being feared is different from being taken seriously, and sometimes you're the butt of jokes among other crime lords who see you as a walking scrapyard rather than a Sith menace. Honestly, that has to sting a little. The personal side of things doesn't get easier either. There's always that shadow of revenge hanging over you. You want to take down Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's almost like that grudge fuels you, but also weighs you down. Focusing too much on revenge means sometimes missing other opportunities. But hey, holding a grudge is kind of the Sith thing to do, right? If you weren't bitter about something, would you even be Darth Maul? As time goes on, you get involved with some unlikely allies and new players. One of the most notable is your brother, Savage Opress. He's also a powerful fighter with his own reasons for hating the Jedi. Together, you try to make a comeback. The two of you start building your own force with a growing network of followers and a plan to take back power. It's kind of like a dysfunctional family reunion, except with more lightsabers and fewer hugs. However, this new chapter isn't a smooth ride. Political alliances shift constantly, betrayals happen regularly, and you realise that in this world, no one really plays fair. You're not just fighting Jedi anymore, you're fighting for every inch of power in a galaxy full of people who want your head. That's a lot of pressure for anyone, especially someone who still has to deal with the limitations of their cybernetic body. And through all of this, life keeps going in its messy way. You're constantly juggling survival, revenge, leadership, and the reality of being a half-machine Sith trying to stay relevant. It's exhausting, but it also proves something about you. You don't quit no matter how many times life slices you down the middle. Either way, Maul's story is a wild ride that shows being a Sith isn't always about glory and power. And if you think about it, that's a pretty relatable story for anyone, Sith or not. You grew up on Naboo, a world of rolling plains and crystal lakes, hardly the dark cradle you'd expect for someone who'd end up as the galaxy's biggest villain. But your childhood wasn't exactly carefree. By the time you were old enough to worry about schoolwork, whispers of power and destiny were already filling your head. You didn't have a normal adolescence with friends. Instead, you spent hours poring over ancient Sith texts that you weren't supposed to see, learning that influence could be more dangerous than any bluster. When you finally met your master, Darth Plagueis, it felt like finding the cheat code to life. He taught you how to bend political systems the way lesser minds bent spoons. You mastered secrets that let you predict and manipulate events before they even happened. You thought, great, now I'm set. But it wasn't that simple. The more you learned, the more you realized that real power means constant vigilance. There was no off switch, no weekend getaway from plotting galaxy-wide schemes. Even your dreams became boardrooms full of senators and whispered betrayals. Living a double life as Senator Palpatine wasn't exactly a thrill ride either. By day, you smiled for the cameras, charming nobles, and trade federations. You passed yourself off as the friendly face Naboo needed after the blockade crisis. By night, you slipped into your true role, weaving webs of influence so delicate that exposing them risked everything. Imagine planning a surprise party that had to stay secret from everyone, except your guest of honor is actually you. And if you slip up, the entire universe comes crashing down. That's the kind of pressure you were under. Even the smallest mistake could unravel years of work. One offhand remark in the Senate podium, one senator who asked too many questions, that was enough to send you scrambling to cover your tracks. You developed a habit of smiling through conversations while mentally cataloguing every ally and every potential threat. Friends? You learned early on that anyone you called a friend could be a liability. Trust became a luxury you couldn't afford. On top of the political tightrope, you had to deal with the toll it took on your personal life. Relationships were complicated when your real self was locked behind layers of deception. When you attended galas or charity events, you had to stay in character, ever careful that your demeanor never slipped into that cold, calculating glare you turned on in private. You could make people do whatever you wanted with a few well-placed words, but you couldn't let them know you were doing it. And if you ever felt lonely, well, you got used to it. There were nights when the Emperor's theme in your head played on loop while you stared at holovids of star systems shifting in your favor. Few people knew how isolating it was to carry the weight of entire worlds on your shoulders. If power was what you craved, loneliness was its silent price tag. By the time you had orchestrated your grand plan, from the fall of the Jedi to the rise of the Empire, you'd sacrificed any chance of a normal life. Freedom meant exposure, peace meant stagnation, and you never stopped scheming for what was next. The victories felt empty because each one raised the stakes. The more you had, the more you had to protect. So here's a question for you. If you could trade all that power for a simple life, say, running a little stall, selling Naboo's best bantha jerky, would you dare to give it up? Or is constant plotting and paranoia just part of the deal when you want to rule the galaxy? That's the reality of being Darth Sidious. You thought you'd found ultimate power. Sometimes, the price of victory is a lifetime without rest, without real connections, and without ever being able to turn off the game. And for you, that first taste of freedom never came without an expiration date. Now let's take a better look at your background. You were just a guy from Naboo trying to make your way in a complicated world. Naboo might sound like a peaceful place, but it was also a place where politics mattered a lot. Growing up there gave him a front row seat to how governments work. The backroom deals, the alliances, the betrayals, stuff most people never see. Your family wasn't famous or powerful. There wasn't a big legacy to live up to. That meant you had to carve your own path, which you did with a mix of intelligence, patience, and a knack for reading people. You weren't the type to rush into things or yell about how you will go to take over the galaxy from day one. Instead, you learned how to move quietly and steadily, like a player setting up a chessboard one piece at a time. You got into politics early, but you didn't start at the top. Like most politicians, you had to prove yourself, get noticed, and build a reputation. The Senate was full of loudmouths and egos, but you knew that being loud wasn't going to get you anywhere. You learned to listen, observe, and pick the right moments to act. It's a skill that made you seem trustworthy and calm, even when you were pulling strings behind the scenes. It's funny when you think about it, how someone who eventually became known as the dark and powerful Sith Lord started out as a relatively unknown senator from a quiet planet. Maybe that's part of why he was so dangerous. Nobody expected much from you at first, so you got to work unnoticed. While others were busy showing off or getting caught up in petty fights, you were building connections, making deals, and setting up the pieces you needed. He didn't have many true friends. It's hard to trust people when your goal is to control everything. But allies? Plenty. People who thought they were working with a helpful senator, not realizing they were playing a role in a much bigger game. Palpatine was great at making people feel important, even if they were just pawns. And pawns are useful. They can be sacrificed or moved around as needed. By the time he was elected Chancellor, a lot of the groundwork was done. The Republic was in trouble, with tensions rising between planets and the Jedi trying to keep peace. Palpatine saw this as an opportunity, and he took it. Instead of trying to fix the problems in a straightforward way, he made sure those problems got worse. He wasn't interested in peace or stability if it meant less control. And here's the thing about politics. It's messy. Everyone has their own agendas, and it's easy to get caught up in the chaos. Palpatine knew that chaos was useful. It distracted people, made them desperate, and opened doors for someone willing to step in and take charge. He played that role perfectly. But as much as he was the master planner, there was always the risk of being found out. You might think ruling the galaxy would mean a life of luxury and ease, but for Palpatine, it meant constantly watching your back. One wrong move, one leak, and everything could collapse. The pressure to keep up the facade, to be the right person at the right time, must have been intense. Imagine going to a party where everyone expects you to be charming and trustworthy, but inside you're calculating how this night will push your plans forward. It's exhausting, but that was the life he chose. And the thing is, he never really got a break from it. Even after becoming Emperor, the game never stopped. Another thing that shaped Palpatine was his belief in the Sith philosophy. He wasn't just about personal gain. He believed that the galaxy needed order, even if it meant harsh measures. He thought the Jedi were naive and weak, standing in the way of progress. So he made it his mission to remove them because they were obstacles. You might wonder, was he ever conflicted? Did he ever think, maybe this isn't worth it? Hard to say, but given how far he pushed his plans, it seems like he was committed all the way. Sometimes ambition drives people to places they never thought they'd go, and Palpatine is a clear example. What's interesting is that his rise shows how power doesn't always come from force or fear alone. It often comes from patience, understanding the system, and using it to your advantage. Alright, so now you're the Emperor. You might think that after pulling off one of the most insane political takeovers in history, you could finally kick back and relax. Maybe pick up a hobby, like painting or taking a cruise through the core worlds. Nope. Instead, your job just gets more complicated, because once you're at the top, everyone's watching you, and even the smallest mistake can blow up into a huge problem. Being Emperor means keeping control over billions of people across countless planets, and most of that control is held together by fear. And fear, it's like a car. It needs constant maintenance. You can't just scare everyone once and expect them to behave forever. Also, power comes with loneliness. You can't really trust anyone completely, because anyone might have their own agenda. That means no real friendships, just alliances and deals. People smile to your face but might be plotting behind your back. That's a heavy price to pay. And here's something else. Even though you're the most powerful person in the galaxy, you're always aware that there are others out there who want to take your place. Whether it's ambitious underlings, rival factions, or even someone with force powers, you're constantly looking over your shoulder. You might think being the Sith Master means unlimited power and freedom, but it also means being locked into a never-ending game of chess where every piece matters. You're always several moves ahead, but even then, surprises happen. So yeah, being Darth Sidious might sound awesome on paper, but from where you're standing, it's a grind. Endless scheming, never trusting anyone fully, managing a galaxy on the edge of chaos, and trying to hold it all together without anyone seeing the cracks. Honestly, it's kind of impressive how you keep it all going without snapping. You've got to respect the stamina that takes. And now that you're here, you might wonder, was it really worth it? Power is great, but the cost? Sometimes it feels like too much. Sure, you're feared, you're respected, but at what point does that stop being fun and just become a burden? Maybe the most Sith thing about being Sidious is that no matter how much power you have, you never really get to enjoy it. The game never stops, the pressure never lets up, and the loneliness just keeps growing. So next time you think about the Emperor, remember that behind all the lightning and dark robes is a guy who's playing the hardest, most exhausting game imaginable. And honestly, that's a tough gig. So, you're Darth Plagueis. Now before you get too excited about the name, because it does sound pretty epic, right? Keep in mind that being Darth Plagueis wasn't exactly so easy. You might have thought that with a title like that, you'd have the galaxy at your feet and unlimited power, but the reality was more complicated. First off, you weren't some warrior smashing through battlefields. No, your strength was more about the subtle stuff, the behind-the-scenes kind of power. You were a master of manipulation, science, and dark secrets, especially when it came to life and death. That's right, you got into the creepy business of cheating death itself. Sounds cool, but imagine how stressful it is trying to hold on to life while knowing everyone around you is out to snatch your power away. What really makes you think, though, is how lonely that kind of power can be. You spend all this time researching and experimenting, trying to find a way to stop dying, to control life itself, but it means trusting almost no one. Everyone around you is either a potential threat or a pawn. If you slip up and let your guard down even a little, that's it. Your empire collapses. And speaking of trust, the biggest mistake you made, and it's a doozy, was trusting your apprentice. Because in the Sith world, an apprentice isn't just a student, they're also a ticking time bomb. You're always aware that the moment your apprentice grows strong enough, they're likely to turn on you. It's part of the tradition, the survival of the fittest deal. You teach them everything you know, and then you get blindsided. Now, this wasn't just some small betrayal, it was the ultimate backstab. You spent years building your power and secrets, and the one person who should have had your back ended up being the one who ended your story. That has to sting, right? You're putting all this energy into extending your life, mastering the dark arts, and then your apprentice just snatches it away. It's like training your replacement only to get fired before your big promotion. But aside from that, think about the pressure. You're obsessed with defying death, constantly pushing the limits of what's possible with the Force. Imagine the mental load that comes with that. Everyone has their own version of stress, but when your entire existence revolves around beating death, it can't be easy to keep your cool. Plus, knowing that no matter how much you learn or how powerful you get, death is always lurking somewhere in the shadows. On top of that, you're living in a galaxy where every Sith Lord has their own agenda. Alliances are shaky, trust is rare, and the politics within the Sith Order are just as cutthroat as the wider galaxy. You're constantly watching your back for those closest to you. It's a tough spot. You're brilliant, you're powerful, but you're also caught in a game that's designed to eat you alive eventually. There's no retirement plan for Sith Lords, and the rules don't favour you sticking around for long. Here's a question for you. If you were in Plagueis' shoes, trying to cheat death and train someone who might one day kill you, how would you even relax? It's like trying to nap on a bed of landmines. Not exactly the chill life most people imagine when they think of Sith power. And to top it all off, you don't even get the satisfaction of being the big boss for long. Your time in the spotlight is limited because the very skills you pass on make your successor stronger than you in time. The system's designed for you to be overtaken, no matter how hard you try to hold on. So yeah, being Darth Plagueis sounds impressive, but when you break it down, it's pretty clear it's a rough gig. All the power in the world doesn't protect you from betrayal, paranoia, or the constant reminder that the clock is ticking on your life and your reign. And hey, just a quick thought. Maybe the real tragedy isn't that Plagueis got killed, but that he spent so much time worrying about dying that he forgot to enjoy what little time he had. Ever find yourself so focused on some goal that you forget to live a little? Yeah, that's Darth Plagueis in a nutshell. So, you've spent years chasing immortality. Not the usual stuff like trying to dodge a blaster or heal a cut, but the full-on, never die, never get sick kind of deal. That's what Darth Plagueis was all about. And trust me, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. Imagine sitting in a dark lab, surrounded by jars of strange glowing fluids and what looks like failed experiments. You're poking at alien DNA, midi-chlorians, and whatever weird biological stuff the Force throws your way, all in the hope that you can stop the whole death thing. Now, this might sound cool if you're into mad science, but after a while, it gets pretty lonely. You're not just a Sith Lord, you're a full-time biologist / alchemist / maniac, with zero time for normal human stuff. Your obsession starts to eat away at you. Forget about casual conversations or downtime. Your social life? Non-existent. You're so focused on tweaking your experiments and finding loopholes in the natural order that regular things like breakfast or chatting with friends don't really happen anymore. Which is ironic, because being a Sith doesn't exactly make friends a priority, but still, total isolation. Now, paranoia creeps in. You know the Sith rule. Always two, no more, no less. There's you, the master, and the apprentice, but every apprentice is a ticking time bomb, always plotting to stab you in the back once they get a whiff of power. So, while you're trying to beat death, you're also watching your own apprentice like a hawk, because any sign of weakness might get you cut down first. Trust is a joke, especially when you're dealing with someone as slippery as Palpatine. And speaking of that, here's the kicker. You're so wrapped up in your immortality research and your politics that you barely notice the person right under your nose. Palpatine is calm, collected, but he's always watching, always waiting. You might think you're the one in control, but every decision you make plays into his hands, whether you see it or not. What's more, this quest for immortality doesn't come cheap. Your body probably suffers from all the experiments, forced tests, strange treatments, dark side rituals. You're not exactly winning a beauty contest here. Being a Sith means embracing pain and darkness, but the toll it takes on your physical self? That's another story. And while your mind is sharp, your body is slowly breaking down, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of trying to live forever. And here's a thought. Even with all this power and knowledge, you're stuck playing politics like any other senator or warlord. You have to keep up appearances, make alliances, and navigate Senate drama, which can be as exhausting as any lightsaber duel. So not only do you have to worry about death and betrayal, you also have to deal with endless meetings and speeches. If you ever wondered what it's like to be a Sith and a politician at the same time, imagine trying to win a popularity contest while hiding a dark secret that could get you killed. Plus, the pressure to keep your secrets safe is insane. One slip up, one person finding out about your Sith identity or your immortality experiments, and everything could come crashing down. You're living a double life all the time, and that kind of tension doesn't exactly make for a relaxing existence. Now, think about how that feels, trying to conquer death, balancing dangerous politics, dodging your apprentice's schemes, all while keeping your own health and sanity in check. It's no wonder Plagueis ended up a tragic figure. The irony is thick. The guy you trained to be your successor, the one you probably think is going to carry on your legacy, is also the guy who's most likely going to end your reign. You can sense it, sometimes catch those little slips or glances that say, yeah, I'm thinking about taking your place. And then there's the fact that no matter how clever or patient you are, your whole plan can fall apart in a blink. You spend decades building your empire quietly, manipulating life and death itself, and it all comes down to trust. Not just trust in others, but the kind of trust you have in your own judgment. And even that can fail you. You probably didn't see it coming when your apprentice struck. It wasn't an epic battle or a huge confrontation. It was sneaky fast and left you without a chance to react. The big, all-powerful Darth Plagueis, defeated not by a rival Sith Lord in an intense duel, but by someone you taught everything to. That's the end of the story about Darth Plagueis, a Sith Lord who mastered the dark side and almost beat death, but got outplayed by the one person he trusted the most. Not exactly the fairy tale ending you'd expect, but maybe the most real one there is. Congratulations, you've just become Darth Vader. If you thought life was complicated before, welcome to a whole new level. You're this imposing figure everyone fears, but underneath it all, you're basically trapped in a metal suit that feels more like a prison than armor. Let me tell you, wearing that thing all day, it's no picnic. First off, moving around is a chore. The suit isn't exactly built for comfort. Every step you take feels like you're carrying the weight of the galaxy on your back. Because, well, you kind of are. Plus, the suit's life support systems keep you alive, but they're also a constant reminder that you're not exactly whole anymore. That breathing you hear, not just intimidating sound effects, it's the suit keeping you alive, and trust me, that's a weird way to start your mornings. You might think, hey, I'm Darth Vader, I'm powerful, I can crush anything. And yeah, power is great, but there's a lot more to the story. For starters, you're constantly dealing with pain. The injuries you got from your fight with Obi-Wan weren't just superficial. You're missing limbs, badly burned, and the suit is basically a high-tech bandage, but a bandage that never comes off. So you're living in a suit that's doing its best to keep you alive while you're feeling pain you can't really escape. And don't get me started on the social stuff. You're supposed to be this terrifying enforcer of the Empire, right? But can you really have friends or anyone to talk to when you're behind a mask that hides your face and muffles your voice? Spoiler, no. People treat you like a walking nightmare or a tool to get their job done. There's no room for, hey, how was your day conversations. It's all orders, missions, and fear. Speaking of orders, your whole life is basically work. Endless missions, chasing down rebels, enforcing the Emperor's will. There's no vacation, no sick days, no mental health days. Just the constant pressure to perform, to be perfect, to never fail. And if you mess up, well, that's not something anyone talks about openly, but you can bet it wouldn't end well. Living like that, always on edge, isn't exactly a great way to keep your sanity. Now here's a funny thing you probably didn't expect, the Emperor. Yeah, your boss, the guy who promised you power and respect but mostly keeps you around as his personal enforcer. You might think you're running the show, you're more like the Empire's scary middle manager. You do the dirty work, you get little credit, and the guy upstairs? He's always one step ahead, watching and waiting, not exactly the dream partnership. And then there's the family drama. Remember Anakin Skywalker? That guy had a wife and kids and dreams. Now you're Darth Vader. You're estranged from your past, cut off from the people who mattered most. It's like your whole personal life got deleted. If you ever try to think about what you lost, it's a quick trip down a dark spiral. But who's got time to dwell when the galaxy's falling apart, and you've got orders to execute, sometimes when you're alone? And yeah, that happens even to someone as terrifying as Vader. You might catch yourself missing the old days. The days before the mask, before the war, before everything got twisted. But the suit is always there, reminding you that those days are gone, and the man behind the mask is more myth than person now. Oh, and let's talk about the breathing again. It sounds cool, sure, but imagine it from your side. That noisy, mechanical wheezing is basically your soundtrack 24/7. Try having a quiet moment when you sound like a malfunctioning robot. Doesn't exactly help with the whole finding peace thing, right? And as much as you want to think you're the big boss, you're still working under someone else's rule. The Emperor calls the shots. Your ambitions, your goals all get filtered through his plans. So you're powerful, but not free. It's like being the strongest player on a team, but the coach makes every decision and you just follow orders. That can be frustrating. It's not all bad. You've got serious respect, or fear at least, from just about everyone. Sometimes that's the only thing that keeps you going, knowing you're the guy no one dares to mess with. So being Darth Vader is a weird mix of power and prison, respect and loneliness, strength and pain. You're the Empire's weapon, but sometimes it feels like you're the one being used. It's hard to feel human when you're living inside a machine and carrying the weight of your past mistakes. If you ask me, being Darth Vader might seem cool from the outside, but living it, it's complicated. There's no easy answer, no glory without sacrifice. And maybe, just maybe, you start wondering if it was all worth it. What do you think? If you were in that suit doing all that dirty work, would you still be the terrifying villain everyone fears? Or would you just want to take off the helmet and disappear for a while? So, now that you've been living in the suit for a while, you start to realize how much it changes everything. When you were Anakin, you had dreams and hopes, even if things didn't always go the way you wanted. Now, as Darth Vader, those dreams feel like distant memories. The suit isn't just metal and tech, it shapes who you are. It limits you, controls you, and kind of rewires your world. Think about this. Every move you make is measured and deliberate because the suit isn't flexible. You can't just shrug off a bad day or stretch your arms like you used to. Instead, every action is slowed down by the weight and mechanics of the armor. That must get tiring, day after day, especially when you're expected to be quick and decisive. The irony isn't lost on you, wearing this powerful suit, but feeling restricted by it. Another thing is how people treat you. Sure, some respect you for your power, but many are afraid or avoid you altogether. It's a lonely position to be in. Commanding legions of troops sounds impressive until you realize you rarely connect with anyone on a personal level. Most people see you as a symbol, not a person. If you wanted a real conversation or just a moment of honesty, good luck finding that in the Empire's halls. The Emperor keeps you busy with missions and political maneuvers, but there's always this sense that you're part of a bigger plan you didn't write. It's like you're the executor of someone else's will, not the master of your own destiny. You might be powerful, but freedom? That's a different story. You follow orders, you enforce rules, and you handle the dirty work, sometimes questioning if the ends really justify the means. On a personal level, the suit affects how you experience the world. Your senses are muted or distorted. The mask filters sounds and alters what you see. You lose a lot of the small things that used to make life richer, like feeling the breeze on your skin or the warmth of the sun. Instead, Everything comes through a layer of tech, and that can make the world feel distant and artificial. And then there's the matter of your voice. You're used to hearing yourself speak in your own tone, with emotion and expression. Now, your voice is a mechanical rasp, controlled by the suit systems. Imagine trying to express yourself or connect with others when your voice sounds like a machine. It's hard to show who you really are behind the mask, so most people just assume you're the intimidating figure they see. Let's talk about trust. You don't have many people you can rely on. The Empire isn't exactly a place for friendships. Everyone is watching everyone else, and suspicion runs high. That means you can't be vulnerable or let your guard down. Trusting someone might get you betrayed or worse. That kind of isolation can wear on you over time, even if you don't show it. Your relationship with the Emperor is complicated. You serve him, but it's clear he holds most of the power. Sometimes you wonder if he sees you as an equal or just a tool. That might not be a comfortable thought, but it's something you have to live with. You're part of a system that values control and dominance above all else. And what about the Jedi? Remember when you were one of them, or at least close to it? Now they're your enemies. You hunt them down, fight them, try to erase everything they stood for. That's a heavy burden. The people you once trained with or cared about are now targets. It's a sharp change, and it has to affect how you see yourself. At times, you might question your path. The choices that led you here weren't simple, and the consequences are enormous. You might ask yourself if the power you gained was worth the cost of losing your old life. But there's no turning back. You're Darth Vader now, and your identity is wrapped up in the suit and the role you play. It's not all bleak, though. You're one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and that comes with its own kind of satisfaction. You command respect, fear, and influence, but that power has limits. It comes with responsibility and sacrifices that weigh heavily. So if you're trying to imagine what it's like being Darth Vader day to day, picture this. You're living in a body that isn't fully yours, with senses dulled and freedom curtailed. You're respected but isolated, powerful but controlled. You're feared but lonely, and every decision you make has consequences not just for you, but for the entire galaxy. It's a lot to carry, and even if you wanted to change things, the system you're part of doesn't really allow for second chances or soft options. It's harsh, relentless, and often unforgiving. That's the reality behind the mask, the man inside struggling with the suit and the role he plays. It's a life of complexity beneath the surface of power and fear. So, here you are, still Darth Vader, carrying the weight of everything that came before. But now there's something new, your son, Luke. Yeah, that guy who seems like the last hope for the galaxy. From your point of view, Luke changes the game. It's not like you knew right away. Finding out Luke was your son must have been a shock. A surprise wrapped up in a whole lot of complicated feelings. You had spent so long buried in the darkness, in the role of the enforcer, the villain everyone feared. Suddenly there's this connection to someone who's not just another opponent or ally, but family. The relationship between you and Luke is strange, tense and honestly full of contradictions. On one hand, you see this young man who's so different from you, hopeful, idealistic, determined. On the other hand, you know that your past, your actions, and the darkness you carry stand between you two. It's hard to know how to reach out, or even if you should. From your perspective, Luke's presence forces you to confront things you might have pushed aside for years. It's a reminder of what you lost, and maybe what you could have been. You start to realize that the path you've been on isn't the only option. But admitting that, even quietly to yourself, isn't easy. There's also that push and pull between wanting to protect Luke and knowing that your own nature, or what you've become, puts him in danger. You might find yourself caught between two worlds, the dark side you've embraced and the hope Luke represents. That can't be a comfortable place to be. And then there's the moment when Luke confronts you, not just as Vader, the fearsome Sith Lord, but as his father. You might think it would be easy to dismiss him, or worse, to try to turn him to your side. But from what you can tell, Luke doesn't just want power or revenge. He wants to save you, or at least save what's left of the man you used to be. That's a powerful position for him to be in. It's rare that someone looks at the so-called villain and sees something more. You might feel challenged, maybe even a little vulnerable, because Luke's hope isn't just about defeating the Empire, it's about reaching you. It's understandable that this would bring up all kinds of emotions. Anger, doubt, maybe even guilt, but also a sense of something you might have missed for years: connection. For the first time in a long time, you see a chance to change course. Luke's belief in you isn't naive. It's complicated, like everything else in this story, but it's real. You start to question what loyalty means, what power means, and what kind of legacy you want to leave behind. It's a turning point. You also have to deal with the Emperor, who's not exactly thrilled about the idea of you stepping back from the dark side. The pressure to stay the course, to keep playing the role assigned to you, is enormous. But Luke's presence makes it clear that maybe it's time to make a different choice. This isn't just about saving yourself. It's about protecting your son, about giving him a chance to live in a galaxy without fear and oppression. That's a heavy responsibility, but it's also an opportunity to finally break free from the past. From where you stand, the chance to redeem yourself might seem risky, even impossible. But Luke's persistence, his refusal to give up on you, pushes you to reconsider. Maybe redemption isn't about wiping the slate clean. Maybe it's about making the right choice when it counts. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's messy, it's uncertain, and it comes with its own kind of pain. But it's real. And for the first time in a long time, you're not just Darth Vader. You're a father trying to do right by his son. Thinking about all this, it's clear that Luke's arrival changes everything. It complicates the story, but also gives it hope. It reminds you that even in the darkest moments, there's a chance to choose differently. Would you be able to make that choice if you were in Vader's position? To turn away from the power and fear that defined your life and reach for something more? That's a question that lingers, and it's part of what makes his story so human. In the end, Vader's relationship with Luke isn't just about family drama or galactic politics. It's about understanding what it means to be human. Flawed, complicated, but capable of change. And that's a story worth thinking about, even when you're not wearing a mask or wielding a lightsaber. So, imagine you're Count Dooku. Before you were the guy with the fancy cape and the curved lightsaber, you were a Jedi. That's already a tough spot because the Jedi Order isn't exactly an easy crowd to please. They've got their strict rules, their rigid sense of right and wrong, and a lot of expectations about how you should behave. You don't just get to be a Jedi Master and chill. It's a lifetime of service, discipline, and sacrifice. You were one of the best too. People looked up to you. You trained under Yoda, and you even had some big names as your students. That means a lot of responsibility, right? Teaching the next generation, keeping the peace, and always trying to balance the ideals of the Order with the messy reality of the galaxy. But here's where things start to get complicated. You begin to notice that the Jedi Order isn't all that it's cracked up to be. There's politics involved, lots of it. You're not just fighting bad guys, you're also navigating a system that's bureaucratic and slow to act. The Republic is falling apart, and the Jedi feel more like peacekeepers, caught in the middle of a political game they don't fully control. You start to see the cracks, and maybe you get frustrated. You want to do something more effective, more meaningful. But the Order's hands are tied. They follow rules that limit how far they can go, and they're hesitant to get deeply involved in the Republic's politics, even when it's clear that's where things are headed. So, what do you do when you're a Jedi Master who wants to make a difference, but the system won't let you? You start looking for other options. You meet people who see the galaxy differently, who believe that the current order is broken and needs to be changed, maybe even by force. That's when you cross paths with Darth Sidious. This guy has a plan, a vision for the future, and he's not interested in playing by the Republic's slow rules. From your perspective, this is tempting. Here's someone who's serious about shaking things up and willing to do what it takes. It's not just about power for the sake of power. It's about fixing a galaxy that feels like it's slipping out of control. But switching sides isn't easy. You're breaking away from everything you once believed in, including the people you trusted. You have to live with the fact that you're now seen as a traitor, someone who abandoned the Jedi Order. Friends become enemies. You're on the run, and you can't trust many people anymore. And what about the guilt? It's hard to say if you really feel it, or if you've justified your choices so much that it's faded away. But from your perspective, you probably realize that things aren't as simple as just switching to the dark side and taking over. You're caught in a complicated web of ambition, loyalty, and a desire for order. As Count Dooku, you have to deal with the consequences of your decision. You're no longer part of the Jedi, but you're not exactly welcomed with open arms in the Sith ranks either. You have to prove yourself constantly, show that you're useful and powerful, and that you can handle the dark side's demands. And let's not forget about the Clone Wars. You're a leader of the Separatists, which means you're responsible for a massive conflict that's tearing the galaxy apart. The weight of that has to be enormous. You're fighting battles, making strategic moves, and trying to stay ahead in a war that seems endless. That also means losses, lives lost, plans failing, alliances breaking. It's not a glamorous job. You don't get to be the hero in this story. Instead, you're the guy leading the fight that causes so much suffering. That's a heavy burden, especially when you're trying to believe you're doing the right thing. And what about trust? Sidious is your master, but he's also someone you have to watch carefully. You can't fully trust him, and he probably doesn't fully trust you. That's a difficult position, to serve someone who's always one step ahead and ready to discard you if you stop being useful. You're playing a dangerous game, always watching your back, always calculating the next move. It's stressful, and it never really lets up. The constant pressure to stay sharp, to be strong, to not show weakness, it's exhausting. So yeah, being Count Dooku isn't exactly the dream life. You started as a respected Jedi Master with big hopes for the galaxy, and you ended up as a Sith Lord caught in a war of manipulation, deception, and endless fighting. From your perspective, it might feel like you were never really in control, even though you had the title and the power. The reality is that you were part of a much bigger plan, one where your role was important but ultimately limited. Thinking about all this, you probably have to wonder, was it worth it? Was the promise of change, of a better order, enough to justify everything that came after? That's a question that probably haunted you, even if you never said it out loud. But that's the life of Count Dooku. Brilliant, powerful, but caught in a situation where the cost was always high, and the chances of real freedom were slim. Now, picking up where we left off, you're Count Dooku, and the Clone Wars are in full swing. You're leading the Separatists, which means you're in charge of a massive army, a war effort that's causing destruction all across the galaxy. That sounds like power, sure, but let me tell you, it's not as glamorous as it seems. First off, you're constantly under pressure. You've got to manage not just the fighting, but also the politics within the Separatist movement. Different factions, different leaders, each with their own agendas and egos. You have to keep them in line, keep them focused on the goal, or else the whole thing falls apart. That's a lot of juggling, especially when everyone is looking at you for answers, expecting you to be the strong one. And you have to be smart about your moves. Every battle, every negotiation has consequences. You can't just win a fight and celebrate. That fight could lead to more enemies, more losses, or worse, mistakes that give your opponents an advantage. You're thinking several steps ahead all the time. On top of that, you're constantly aware of Sidious lurking in the background. He's the one pulling the strings, the one with the ultimate plan. You're not just working for your own vision anymore. You're a piece in his game. That can be frustrating, knowing your ambitions might never fully come to life because you're serving someone else's agenda. You have to watch your words carefully, your actions. One wrong move, and Sidious could decide you're no longer useful. That kind of uncertainty isn't easy to live with. You don't get to relax or lower your guard because there's always someone ready to take your place. Let's talk about your personal life for a second. Being Count Dooku means you don't really have space for normal relationships or downtime. You're a public figure, a leader of a war, and a Sith apprentice. That's a heavy identity to carry. It isolates you from people who might care about you. Trust is limited because you know everyone could betray you if it suits them. And here's something else. Your old life as a Jedi isn't really gone. You probably think about it sometimes, about what you left behind, the principles, the friends, the sense of purpose. But now, that's all complicated by everything you've done. You're no longer part of that community, and you might wonder if you made the right choice. Then there's the battlefield itself. You're in the middle of massive conflicts that cost thousands of lives. It's not just soldiers either. Civilians get caught in the crossfire. That reality has to weigh on you. You might try to convince yourself it's for the greater good, but the cost is real and constant. Also, your own power has limits. Being a Sith and a leader means you have to balance your Force abilities with your strategic role. You can't just rush into fights or use your power recklessly. You need to be a commander, a politician, and a fighter all at once. That's a lot to handle, and slipping up could be deadly. One more thing to consider, the sense of legacy. You want to be remembered for something, for changing the galaxy or for being a strong leader. But the problem is, the galaxy isn't kind to people like you. You're caught between being feared and hated. The people you lead might respect you, but they don't necessarily like you. The Jedi see you as a villain, and the Sith probably see you as a tool. And then there's the endgame you can't control. You might have ideas about how things should finish, how you want to be remembered, but in reality, you're part of a bigger picture that isn't yours to decide. Sidious' plan will move forward with or without you. So, from your perspective, it sucks to be Count Dooku because even though you hold a lot of power, you don't really get to call the shots. You're caught in the middle of a war that drains your energy, tests your loyalty, and constantly reminds you that your fate isn't fully in your hands. It's a role filled with tough decisions, strategic sacrifices, and a constant need to watch your back. Not exactly the way most people imagine life at the top. By now, you've been involved in this galaxy-wide conflict for a long time. You've seen the destruction, the shifting alliances, and the growing tension between the Republic and the Separatists. You might have thought, back when you left the Jedi, that you could build something new or fix what you saw as broken. But things haven't turned out that way. Instead, you're part of a conflict that seems endless, with no clear victory in sight, only more loss and chaos. One of the hardest parts to deal with is knowing that your role, as big as it feels, is temporary. Sidious, the person who brought you into this, has his own plans. You might have hoped for a place at the top, some recognition for your efforts and your vision. But the truth is, you're seen as a stepping stone, someone useful for now, but not forever. That's a heavy thing to carry, knowing that your loyalty and work could be discarded at any moment. You have to balance your ambition with caution, always aware that the people you trust the most might turn on you. That kind of uncertainty can wear you down. At this point, you probably notice how much you've sacrificed. Your old life as a Jedi is gone, your relationships changed or lost. The people you once knew might now see you as an enemy, and the people you lead don't fully respect you. They follow because they have to, not because they believe in you. You're in a position where your power feels like a trap. You've got influence, but it's tied to a war that's tearing the galaxy apart. And you're constantly reminded that the war isn't really about what you want. It's about a bigger game, one that doesn't have a place for you once it's done. Another tough part is dealing with your own legacy, how history will remember you. You might have thought your actions would bring change, maybe even peace under a new order, but instead, you're caught in the middle of destruction and betrayal. Your vision feels overshadowed by the chaos and the people who outmaneuver you. And speaking of betrayal, that's what ultimately defines this stage of your story. You don't get to control how it happens, but it does. Someone you worked closely with, someone you trusted, turns against you. That's a brutal reality. It's a reminder that, in your position, trust is a luxury you can't afford. But there's also a strange kind of clarity that comes with this. Once you understand your role as part of a larger plan, you start to see things differently. You see the galaxy not as a place you can change, but as a stage where power shifts constantly, and individuals are often caught in the middle of forces bigger than themselves. So by the end of your journey, as Count Dooku, you're living with a mix of power and vulnerability. You're respected and feared, but also disposable. You have influence, but it's limited by those above you, and you face the harsh truth that your place in history might not be what you wanted or expected. This makes being Count Dooku complicated. It's not about dramatic battles or epic speeches. It's about navigating a world where your actions matter, but where you're also just one player among many. A world where ambition meets reality, and where control is always shared or taken away. If you think about it, this story isn't unique to Dooku. It's a story about power, trust, and survival in a difficult place. Some of those lessons feel pretty relevant, no matter where you are. That's the reality of being Count Dooku. Not just a villain or a hero, but a person caught between ideals and the harshness of the game they're playing. Someone who learned that in the end, even the strongest players have to watch their backs. So, you're stepping into the shoes of Darth Revan. And from the very beginning, it's clear this isn't going to be a straightforward journey. You start off as a Jedi, trained in the ways of the Force, taught to protect peace and uphold justice in the galaxy. But very quickly, things don't stay simple. You get thrown into this massive conflict, the Mandalorian Wars, that shakes everything you thought you knew. Instead of sitting on the sidelines, you jump right in, leading soldiers in battles that demand tough decisions and force you to question the Jedi Order's strict rules. That's your first real taste of the complicated nature of being Revan, having to balance what you believe with what the situation demands. And it doesn't stop there. As you go deeper into the war, you start feeling this pull toward the dark side. It's subtle at first, almost like a whisper, but it's real. You're not some villain right away, but you're also not the pure Jedi you once were. You begin to realize that the galaxy isn't black and white. The lines blur, and you're stuck navigating that grey area. That kind of internal conflict is draining. You're constantly fighting yourself, wondering if you're making the right choices, or if you're slowly losing your way. On top of the physical battles, you have to deal with a mental and emotional battle that doesn't have a clear endpoint. Imagine trying to figure out who you are when the very foundation of your identity is shifting. You remember being the Jedi Revan, the hero, but then things get twisted. At some point, you become Darth Revan, a Sith Lord. That shift isn't just a title change, it's a complete upheaval of your values, your goals, and even how you see yourself. It's a lot to carry. The leadership role you take on comes with an incredible weight. You're not just making decisions for yourself anymore. You're leading armies, strategizing entire campaigns, and trying to manage alliances across a fractured galaxy. Each decision can mean life or death for thousands of people. That's pressure most people never experience. You can't afford to make mistakes, but the galaxy is unpredictable. Every choice feels like walking a tightrope, where one wrong step could bring disaster. Then there's the issue of trust. In a time of war and political chaos, trust is rare. You'll find yourself questioning everyone. Allies, friends, even your own instincts. People have their own motives and hidden agendas, and some will turn on you if it benefits them. Navigating those shifting loyalties is exhausting. It means you're always watching your back, never fully able to relax or let your guard down. Because of all this, personal relationships get complicated. You might want to connect with others or find some support, but it's difficult when you're carrying so many secrets and responsibilities. Being Revan often means feeling isolated, even when surrounded by people. The role pulls you away from normal connections and forces you to live in this space where vulnerability can be dangerous. One of the most difficult parts of being Revan is dealing with the consequences of your actions. When you're making choices that affect entire planets and populations, it's impossible to avoid collateral damage. Some decisions, no matter how necessary they seem at the moment, have fallout that weighs heavily on you later. And because your story isn't straightforward, because it involves shifting allegiances, betrayals, and identity struggles, you're left carrying that burden without clear closure. And speaking of identity struggles, one of the most unique challenges for you as Revan is the way your memory gets messed with. After being captured, your memories are wiped and rewritten by the Jedi Council. Imagine waking up and not remembering who you are, where you come from, or what you've done. It's disorienting and frustrating, like you're living someone else's life and trying to piece together your own. You're forced to relearn everything and make choices that could either bring you back to the light or push you deeper into darkness. That situation puts you in a difficult position. On one hand, you want to be the hero you once were, to fight for what's right. On the other, the shadow of your past actions as Darth Revan hangs over you. It's like living with two very different people inside you, each pulling you in opposite directions. That internal tug-of-war never really goes away. The galaxy itself doesn't make things any easier. It's a messy place, filled with political corruption, constant war, and competing factions all trying to get ahead. Trying to make a difference in that kind of environment means you're constantly adapting and reconsidering your plans. Stability is almost impossible, and you have to learn to deal with failure and setbacks because they're part of the process. And here's something else to consider. Being Revan means living with the knowledge that your story will never have a simple ending. Your path twists and turns, sometimes in unexpected ways. You don't always get to choose how your story unfolds, and you have to accept uncertainty. That's hard to handle, especially when you want some control over your destiny. So when you look at it all together, being Darth Revan is a lot more complicated than it looks from the outside. It's about carrying a weight that most people never have to carry, all while trying to keep some part of yourself intact. If you think about it, being Revan isn't really about being a villain or a hero. It's about being human in the middle of impossible circumstances. And that's why it sucks, because you don't get a break, and there's always something more to figure out. Let's say you've made it through the Mandalorian Wars. You've led fleets, won battles, taken risks most Jedi wouldn't dare to touch. You've become a symbol, both admired and feared. But that doesn't mean things are getting easier. Actually, that's where things start to fall apart in ways you never expected. You've crossed a line by now. You're no longer a Jedi in the traditional sense. You've taken the war into your own hands, and you've dragged others with you. Jedi who followed you have slowly stopped calling themselves Jedi. You start calling yourself something else, something bigger than a knight in a robe. You take on the name Darth Revan. You tell yourself it's just a tool and a title to reshape the galaxy. But it doesn't take long before the title starts reshaping you. Your relationship with the Force, that changes too. At first it was all about balance, calm and discipline. But now it's a rawer, more aggressive version. You're tapping into something darker that answers faster, with more force. You feel more powerful than you've ever felt before. But it comes with a catch. You start depending on it. It becomes harder and harder to control, and eventually you stop trying. You begin to justify everything through results. If it works, it's worth it. That kind of mindset doesn't happen overnight, but once you're in it, it's hard to pull back. Meanwhile, you and your apprentice, Darth Malak, start building an empire in secret. The Republic thinks the war is over. The Jedi think they've won, but you're out here in the unknown regions, rebuilding everything from scratch. Fleets, alliances, weapons. You've got vision, sure, but vision without stability turns into chaos pretty fast. Malak is a whole problem on his own. You picked him, trained and trusted him to help carry out this plan, but even early on, it's clear he doesn't fully get it. He's impatient, reckless, way more focused on conquest than strategy. You're constantly fixing his messes, second-guessing his motives, and managing his ego. And every time you shut him down, that tension just builds. You can tell he's watching your every move, waiting for a sign of weakness. It's less of a partnership and more like damage control every day. And it's not just Malak. You're trying to hold this whole empire together while your foundation is built on secrecy and manipulation. You don't have allies. You have pawns. You're pulling strings constantly, controlling politicians, intimidating warlords, bribing manufacturers. It works for a while, but it's exhausting. You're always one bad conversation or one missed detail away from the whole thing blowing up in your face. And the worst part? You don't even realize how far you've drifted from who you used to be. You wake up, give orders, make deals, crush opposition, rinse and repeat. Somewhere along the way, you stop reflecting. You stop questioning the bigger picture. You're caught in the loop of keeping control at all costs. That's how you lose parts of yourself without even noticing. Eventually, things reach a boiling point. Malak turns on you. That part stings more than you expect. You always knew he had ambitions, but deep down, you thought he wouldn't take that step. But he does. He fires on your ship mid-battle, leaves you for dead, and takes your place at the top. He doesn't hesitate. Just like that, you're out. You survive barely. And now the Jedi swoop in. They don't kill you. Instead, they do something stranger. They wipe your memory and reprogram you. Not in a sci-fi brain chip kind of way, but they reshape your identity. They turn you into a tool for their own use, planting you back into the galaxy like a sleeper agent who doesn't even know who they are. So now you're not Revan the war hero or Revan the Sith Lord. You're someone else. A person with no context, no past, no clear purpose beyond what you're told. And even though you don't remember your history, you feel it in weird ways. Like walking through a corridor you've never seen and knowing exactly where it leads, or hearing someone say your name and feeling uncomfortable without knowing why. It's like living with a ghost version of yourself, constantly tapping you on the shoulder. Meanwhile, the Jedi who saved you won't give you straight answers. They keep things vague. You start to realize they don't really trust you, but they still need you. That's why they're keeping you close. You're useful now, but the second you become inconvenient, you'll be disposable again. So you play along. You do the missions. You build friendships with people who don't know who you were. And all the while, you're piecing together bits of your past through scattered clues. What's strange is that people you meet in the galaxy start treating you like a legend. Both revered and feared. Some are terrified of you, some worship you, and you're stuck pretending you're just a regular person, all while slowly realizing you were once the kind of figure that reshaped history. But you don't feel like that person anymore, and you're not sure if you even want to be. So now you're caught in this awkward space, pretending to be someone new, haunted by someone you used to be, while everyone around you expects you to become something again. It's tiring. You want answers, but each one brings more questions. You want direction, but every step forward feels like digging deeper into something darker. And eventually, you have to make a choice what to do with the weight of your own legend. Because the longer you keep going, the more you realize that people don't care who you really are. They care who you used to be, or who they think you are. You've become a story, and stories are hard to live inside. By the time you're coming to terms with the fact that your past has been wiped clean, and you're living in this in-between space, the galaxy hasn't exactly settled down. If anything, things feel messier than ever. The Sith Empire you helped create is still a threat. The Jedi are still wary, and everyone else is caught in the crossfire. You find yourself back in the middle of all this, not quite sure what role you're supposed to play anymore. You've got fragments of memories floating around, faces, places, feelings, but nothing solid enough to grasp. You're expected to fight the Sith Empire, but you also wonder if the Sith part of you still exists, somewhere under the surface, waiting to come back. That's a weird place to be in. Imagine waking up in a house you don't remember buying, with people who treat you like family, but you don't feel that connection. You want to belong, but there's this persistent feeling that part of you belongs somewhere else, or maybe nowhere at all. It's unsettling, but you keep moving forward because standing still isn't an option. One of the hardest parts is dealing with the trust, or the lack of it. The Jedi saved you but don't fully trust you. Every mission you go on, every decision you make, there's this silent judgment, like they're waiting to see if you'll fall back into the old ways. You get why. After all, you were one of the most dangerous Sith Lords the galaxy has ever known. But it still weighs on you. You want to prove you're different now, but it's hard to shake that shadow. At the same time, you're starting to understand that people's expectations can be just as limiting as their doubts. Everyone sees you as a legend, a weapon, a tool, rarely as a person. You begin to realize the legend is a cage, and the story everyone tells about you isn't always the story you live. You try to find some balance. Who are you really? Beyond Revan, beyond Sith or Jedi? The answer isn't clear. You're pulled by the need to make things right, to fix what you broke, but also by the knowledge that fixing something as massive as galactic conflict isn't a simple task. It's a slow process, and patience isn't exactly your strong suit. Your relationships get complicated. You have allies, sure, but forming genuine connections is tricky when you're always wondering if someone's watching for signs of your true self. You meet people who admire you, some who fear you, others who just want to use you. It's hard to know who to trust. You want to be close, but the walls you've built, both around yourself and because of your reputation, don't come down easily. When the final confrontation with the Sith Empire comes, it's a test of everything you've become. You lead your forces, rely on your skills, and tap into that connection with the Force that has evolved over time. But this time, it's different. You're not fighting for power or revenge, but for a chance to choose your own path. In the end, whether you win or lose, it's important that you fought for something bigger than yourself. The galaxy might remember you as a hero or a villain, but what matters is what you decide in that moment, not what others expect. You walk away from that final battle changed again, but this time with a sense of purpose that isn't tied to any title or legend. You realize it's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to keep figuring things out as you go. You're born as Dessel on Apatros, a rock of a planet where life feels like it's constantly punching you in the face. Orphans, crime, and harsh work define your childhood. You learn early that strength and cunning matter more than compassion or friendship. That mindset helps you survive, but it doesn't make for a comfortable existence. Imagine growing up in that environment. Every breath you take could cost you a day's wages, or worse. You meet people who are willing to cut corners, literally, to get ahead. You learn to fight, to steal, and to lie. That kind of life toughens you in ways most Jedi wouldn't recognize. But it also leaves a scar. You start believing that only power and fear get results. Then you end up on Tython, answering the call of the Force, and you're plucked out of that misery and welcomed by the Jedi Order. At first, it's a relief. No more back alley brawls. You even get a shot at purpose. But you quickly notice there's a price. Endless rules, endless politics, endless lectures about emotions. You're not exactly made for peace and patience. The Jedi mindset clashes with everything you are. Their focus on balance and serenity feels like a cage. You want to push limits, not tiptoe around them. When a fellow student hurts his arm, you think, good, someone to spar with, not let me tend your wound. That sparks conflict. You get in trouble for being too aggressive, too direct. The Order tries to teach you compassion, but you wonder how compassion helps when people are dying in war zones. Eventually you're kicked out, turned into an outlaw. That stings, but it also opens a door you never saw coming. Out there, on the fringes, you meet a Sith named Cordis, who shows you a different path. Embrace your anger, use it, refine it into power. He calls it the dark side. You realize your childhood scars and your Jedi frustrations fit perfectly into this other vision. Becoming Darth Bane. It was a slow burn. You learn to use fear as a tool, to forge alliances only until they serve you, then discard them. It's pragmatic if ruthless. You're no longer just surviving. You're planning how to dominate. You train your body, your mind, and your understanding of the Force until you feel unstoppable. That feels good at first, but there's a catch. Trust becomes impossible. You gather followers, breeding fear and loyalty, but you never let anyone get too close. You know what happens when apprentices grow too strong. You see how they turn on their masters. In the Sith tradition, betrayal is expected. You learn quickly that, in the end, power politics devour everyone equally. And here comes the humour you didn't see coming. Part of you misses that messy street life on Apatros. At least there, you knew who to punch and when to duck. Here, it's all shadow wars and back alley promises. Some days you'd kill for a simple fistfight without the political fallout. But the real turning point is the moment you decide the Sith Order itself needs a reboot. Too many Sith Lords, too many betrayals, too much infighting. You conclude that a fresh start means stripping it down to just two. One master, one apprentice. That becomes your rule of two. It's a bold move, condense power, and make sure betrayal always leaves someone on top. It's efficient, but it also means you're committing to absolute loneliness. You're basically designing a system where you'll end up alone or dead. So, by the time you take on the name Darth Bane, you're fully invested in a life where every alliance is temporary, every deal is laced with suspicion, and every victory places you closer to the day you have to betray, or be betrayed. You traded the scarred streets of Apatros for the scarred legacy of the Sith, and you know deep down both paths are rough. If you were in Bane's boots, you might wonder, is it worth it? Building a legacy that demands solitude and constant vigilance? Or is there any chance of finding purpose without burning every bridge? That's the question swirling around as you stand on the edge of history, ready to reshape the Sith Order forever. So, now that you've stepped fully into being Darth Bane, things get a little more complicated than just wielding power and running your own show. You're playing a dangerous game with the Sith Order itself, a game that's about control, but also survival. You're rewriting the rules in a way that nobody else expected. The Sith before you were messy, lots of lords, lots of chaos, and frankly, a whole lot of backstabbing that left the Order weaker instead of stronger. You want to fix that, but fixing it means making some tough decisions. You decide the rule of two is the way forward. Only two Sith exist at a time, a master and an apprentice. Sounds simple, but it's a brutal philosophy. It means trust is fleeting. Everyone's got an expiration date. You have to be sharp. Every move you make matters because you're carrying the entire future of the Sith on your shoulders now. You aren't just surviving yourself. You're responsible for making sure the Sith don't disappear. That's heavy. You don't get to relax, ever. Think about the loneliness. You spend years cultivating an apprentice, training them to be powerful and cunning, but you know that eventually they'll have to overthrow you. That's the system. The strongest survives. So even while you teach them everything you know, there's this undercurrent of suspicion. Can you trust them? How long before they try to kill you? There's a strange mix of mentorship and paranoia. You train your apprentice like you would a close friend, but there's always a part of you watching their every move, ready to strike if they show any sign of weakness or betrayal. It's exhausting, But you have to do it because failure isn't an option. On top of that, your methods are extreme. You don't just dabble in Sith teachings, you push the boundaries of the dark side. Experiment with powers that most would shy away from. You're driven by the idea of ultimate strength, and sometimes that means walking a line that others wouldn't dare cross. And it's not like you're popular. Your reputation is that of a ruthless, single-minded force of nature. If you were hanging out in the Sith equivalent of a bar, you'd be the guy everyone watches nervously, knowing he's not someone to cross. But on your own, that reputation doesn't mean much when the shadows close in. Here's a little irony for you. Despite all the dark power and the cunning moves, you're constantly fighting to avoid becoming the victim of the very system you created. The rule of two sets up this endless cycle of betrayal and ambition. You want to control it, but control is slippery when everyone is trying to take you down. Now, you might think that with all this power, the galaxy would be at your fingertips. But power comes with its own problems. You're always in danger, from Jedi hunting you, from your own apprentice plotting your end, and from the fragile alliances you have to keep just to stay alive. And yes, there's some satisfaction in knowing you reshaped the Sith. But it's not like you get to sit back and enjoy it. You're constantly planning your next move, wondering if this is the moment your apprentice will decide it's time to strike. It's a high-stakes chess game with real consequences. Oh, and about that apprentice, if you think picking one is easy, think again. It's not just about finding someone strong in the Force. You need someone who's ruthless enough to survive, but obedient enough to follow your lead. Not exactly the easiest balance to strike. It's a delicate dance. If your apprentice is too weak, the order might fall apart. If they're too strong too soon, well, you're out. So you train, test, and push them, always looking for signs of weakness or ambition that might spell trouble. You're also fighting your own personal demons. The dark side feeds on anger and pain, but it also takes a toll. You can feel yourself slipping into the edge of madness sometimes, questioning if the power is worth the cost. And trust me, it's not the kind of thing you bring up at Sith dinner parties. In a way, you're trapped by your own creation. You wanted to make the Sith stronger, more focused, and you did, but at the price of constant vigilance, loneliness, and a life where trust is a luxury you can't afford. But hey, if you're into that kind of pressure and living on the edge, maybe being Darth Bane isn't all bad. You get to play the ultimate game of power, influence, and survival. Just don't get too comfortable, because the minute you do, that apprentice might be sharpening their lightsaber just for you. So, you're deep in the trenches as Darth Bane. You've built this whole new framework for the Sith, the rule of two. And while it seems elegant, it's also a bit of a double-edged lightsaber. You realize that the rule isn't just about keeping the Sith hidden or powerful, it's about survival, pure and simple. Every day you wake up knowing that your apprentice is both your greatest asset and your most serious threat. It's kind of like mentoring a very ambitious kid who's already thinking about taking your car keys. You might think the Sith Masters before you had it rough, but your problem is different. It's about maintaining control in a system designed to tear itself apart. You're not just fighting enemies out in the galaxy, like the Jedi or other Sith factions. You're fighting the natural order of the rule of two itself. It's built on the idea that the apprentice eventually replaces the master, so you can't get comfortable. You're basically living on borrowed time, and that's a hard mindset to shake. When you're not watching your back, you're investing all your energy into making sure the Sith get stronger with each generation. You know you're planting seeds that might not even sprout during your lifetime. That takes patience, a lot of it, and probably a tolerance for uncertainty that not many people have. And patience isn't easy when you're juggling the constant threat of assassination or betrayal. Plus, you have to stay ahead of the Jedi, who aren't exactly clueless about the Sith's existence. Every move you make must be calculated to avoid exposing the Order. There's no room for mistakes because one slip-up could mean the end of everything you've worked for. Speaking of calculations, your life isn't all doom and gloom. Sometimes you get to revel in your own cunning. You're not just some brute with a lightsaber. You're a strategist, a planner, someone who reshapes the galaxy's balance behind the scenes. And that kind of power can be intoxicating, even if it comes with a side of paranoia. But let's be honest, the paranoia is real. You learn to read every gesture, every glance, even the silence around you. You develop this sixth sense for deception, because in your world, people don't just talk behind your back. They're usually plotting to take your head. You start wondering if that loyal apprentice really is loyal, or just really good at pretending? Spoiler, usually the latter. Here's a fun fact. You become really, really good at keeping secrets. Your entire existence revolves around hiding your true plans from both the Jedi and your apprentice. You might be the biggest power player in the galaxy, but you're also the best actor in the room. If there was a Sith Academy of Espionage, you'd be the valedictorian. Despite all this, you know that the rule of two is the only way to preserve the Sith legacy. Your predecessors, with their crowded, messy power struggles, only weakened the Order. You wanted something lean, efficient, and deadly. And that's exactly what you created. Your vision outlasted you, which is more than most Sith Lords can say. Still, it's a lonely path. You don't get to enjoy the spoils of victory much. By the time you've perfected your dark arts and secured your place, you're already preparing for the day you'll be challenged. You might have made the rules, but you didn't write in a retirement plan. And here's the kicker. Your apprentice, who you've molded and sharpened, is always watching for weaknesses. You see the signs, the impatience, the hunger, the subtle ways they test your limits. It's a constant game of who's really in control. Spoiler alert, it's usually whoever strikes first. Alright, so you're Darth Nihilus. Let that sink in for a second. It sounds pretty cool at first, right? The name alone is intimidating, and everyone knows you as some terrifying Sith Lord who can suck the life out of entire planets. But here's the thing, being Darth Nihilus isn't as awesome as it sounds. In fact, it's pretty rough. Really rough. First off, you don't really have a body anymore. I mean, you have something that looks like a person. A tall, cloaked figure with a creepy mask. But the truth is, what's underneath that cloak is basically a void. You're not human in any real sense anymore. Your original self, the person you used to be, is gone. You're a walking, talking force of hunger. That's your whole existence now. Hunger. And not like being hungry for lunch. This is a deep, gnawing, all-consuming hunger that never gets satisfied. It all started at Malachor 5. You were there when the mass shadow generator went off. That catastrophic weapon that wiped out the planet and killed thousands, maybe millions. The blast should have destroyed you, but instead, it tore you apart and changed you. Your body was destroyed, but your connection to the Force became twisted. You became this being that feeds on the Force itself, not just from individuals, but entire planets. That's right, you're like a cosmic vacuum cleaner. You inhale the life energy of anyone nearby, and that keeps you alive. Sounds like a superpower, right? Except it's a curse disguised as power. Because no matter how much you consume, the hunger never goes away. Imagine trying to fill an endless pit. Every time you feed, you feel better for a moment, but the emptiness comes back almost immediately. You don't just want power, you need it just to stay stable. If you don't keep feeding, you risk fading away, literally disappearing. That's kind of a big deal when you're trying to rule the galaxy. And since you're basically Force energy wrapped in a robe, normal things like eating, sleeping, or even interacting with people don't work the same way anymore. You don't have the kind of relationships other Sith Lords had. You're isolated, wandering through space, searching for more Force energy to keep yourself together. People fear you, but not the respectful kind, more like run and hide fear, which doesn't exactly make for good company. Your voice? Yeah, it's more like a haunting echo that people hear inside their heads. You don't talk much because there's no real you left to carry a conversation. You send out a kind of feeling, hunger, darkness, despair, and people pick up on that instead. Not a great way to make friends, obviously. Then there's Darth Trier, who finds you after you've been drifting in this hollow state for a while. She's a bit of a complicated figure, a mentor and manipulator rolled into one. She helps you control your hunger, to focus it instead of letting it tear you apart. Together with Darth Sidious, they form the Sith Triumvirate. If you think that sounds like a cool Sith group, it's more like three broken individuals bound by shared misery and dark ambitions. Trust isn't really part of the package. You're the power behind the Triumvirate. People don't just fear you because of your skills, they fear you because you erased them. Jedi don't just fall before you, they get erased, their life essence absorbed into your endless void. That's your version of an upper hand in battle. You don't fight with lightsabers or strategic genius, you devour. Entire squads vanish like they never existed. Here's the funny thing though. Despite all this, you're not a typical villain who enjoys their power. It's not like you're sitting back sipping a drink and thinking, yeah, this hunger thing is great. You're constantly fighting to stay whole. The hunger is exhausting. You don't get to enjoy the spoils of power because feeding never fills you up. It's a desperate survival mechanism, not a lifestyle choice. This creates a pretty miserable existence. You're not connected to the galaxy or people in any meaningful way. You're a force of destruction that even your allies avoid getting too close to, partly because they don't want to be consumed, and partly because there's nothing really there. Your identity is dissolving, lost to the hunger that keeps you alive. You've become a legend, sure, but a tragic one. Your name carries fear and mystery, but behind the mask, there's just emptiness. You're a dark side warning. This is what happens if you let the hunger for power consume you so completely that you lose your humanity. And when you think about it, that's probably the worst part, knowing that all your strength is just a band-aid holding together what's left of you. One day you might not find enough energy. One day the hunger wins and you disappear, not with a bang, but with a slow fading, like a candle running out of wax. You're trying to keep this whole living force vacuum thing under control. Remember how I said the hunger never goes away? Well, now you're learning that managing it is a full-time job, and it's one that doesn't get easier. Think about it. You have to constantly feed on others' life force, or you start breaking apart. Your survival depends on sucking energy from anything nearby, and that's a seriously lonely way to exist. At this point, you might be wondering, okay, but how do I find enough force energy to keep going? You don't exactly have a 9 to 5, and you certainly don't have a stable meal plan. The galaxy isn't handing out buffet passes, so you wander. And I mean that literally, drifting from system to system, hunting down Jedi, Sith, and anyone else with enough force presence to keep your hollow self from fading. This nomadic lifestyle doesn't sound like much fun. You're basically a cosmic parasite. Your presence is toxic to others. The moment you get close, people start feeling uneasy, weak, drained. It's hard to make friends when your idea of hanging out is accidentally siphoning away their life energy. Then there's the relationship with your team, the Sith triumvirate. On paper, teaming up with Darth Traya and Darth Sion sounds like a solid Sith alliance. But in reality, it's a trio of deeply broken people who don't really trust each other. They're bound together more by necessity than loyalty or friendship. You're the silent enforcer, the walking disaster that absorbs all the pain and destruction. Darth Traya is the mastermind and Darth Sion is the physical embodiment of rage and pain. You're the guy who only plays the triangle, but it's the loudest triangle ever. And speaking of roles, your skills don't lend themselves well to traditional Sith stuff. You're not the best swordsman, your lightsaber skills are okay, but your real weapon is your ability to consume life energy. That means you don't win fights by out-dueling opponents, but by making them weaker until they fall apart. It's efficient, but not exactly glamorous. Now, all this might sound grim, but here's where the small bit of humour sneaks in. Imagine trying to flirt when your existence is basically, hey, I suck your life force away. Not exactly a conversation starter. Hey there, want to grab a drink? I promise I won't drain your energy much. Yeah, good luck with that. On a serious note though, your condition limits everything about your life. You can't settle down anywhere, can't form real bonds, and can't even really enjoy the power you have because you're too busy keeping yourself from unraveling. It's like being stuck on a hamster wheel of hunger with no finish line. Your dependency on the force energy means you're vulnerable too. If someone figures out your weakness, your need to feed, they can exploit it. And that's exactly what happened eventually. Jedi and Sith alike came to fear you, yes, but they also learned to avoid giving you too much power. The more you feed, the more obvious you become, and that can backfire. One of the biggest challenges is the toll this existence takes on your own mind. You're not just physically hollow, your identity is slipping away too. You're a shadow of your former self, driven by instincts more than will. The hunger affects your thoughts, your motivations, even your ability to plan. Sometimes it's less about grand Sith schemes and more about making sure you survive another day without dissolving into nothingness. It's a lonely existence that doesn't reward you with peace or satisfaction. Power is meaningless when it's tied to constant survival. And that brings us back to the core of why it sucked to be Darth Nihilus. You're a terrifying figure, sure, but behind the mask is someone struggling to hold on to what little remains of themselves. constantly hungry, isolated, and fading. So next time you think being a powerful Sith Lord means having all the control and glory, remember Darth Nihilus. He's the guy who's powerful, but trapped by his own existence, a force of destruction that can never rest, never enjoy, never truly live. So, you're Darth Vitiate, or Tenebrae, if we're going way back, before you got your shiny Sith title. Let's start at the very beginning. And spoiler, your early life was anything but a vacation. You were born on Nathema, a planet that looked beautiful enough, but was a pretty rough place to grow up, especially if your dad's a Sith Lord who wants nothing to do with you. Your mum? Just a simple local farmer's wife. Basically, your parents' relationship was about as warm and fuzzy as a womp rat's tail. From the moment you took your first breath, life was already a bit of a mess. Your father, Dramath, didn't exactly roll out the red carpet. If anything, he saw you as a liability, or worse, an annoyance. If you think that's rough, just wait, because you're not an ordinary kid. You've got force powers that even adults on your planet can barely comprehend, and that comes with its own problems. By the time you were little more than a toddler, you were already messing with people's minds, causing animals to explode, and generally making everyone around you nervous. Imagine being that kid in school who can make things float with a glance, but without any of the charm or likability. Yeah, fun times. By the time you hit 10, things took a dark turn. You killed your father, cold, no hesitation, no regret. It wasn't even about revenge, it was just business. And once he was out of the way, you took over the planet. Picture that. A kid with the power of a Sith Lord ruling an entire world before most kids have even finished elementary school. The Sith Council heard about you naturally. Most would think they'd try to stop this kid from becoming a Dark Lord. Nope. They basically shrugged and said, "All right, you're a Sith now, good luck." And that's when the real fun began. But if you expected a life of glory and conquest, you're about to find out how lonely that ride really is. Unlike other Sith who have that fiery passion, vendettas, or grudges that keep them ticking, you're colder than a Hoth blizzard. Your focus isn't on emotion or revenge, it's control, power, and above all, survival. You're not out here trying to impress anyone or make a point, you want to exist forever. So you start digging into Sith lore and forbidden knowledge, looking for a way to cheat death. It's not the stuff of legends, it's pure calculated obsession. And here's a kicker, you don't make friends, or even real enemies. Everyone is a tool. You use, manipulate, and discard people like they're pieces on a chessboard. It's effective, sure, but not exactly a recipe for a fun social life. Imagine trying to keep up that level of cold manipulation for centuries. Your only real companion is the dark side itself, and let me tell you, it doesn't throw great parties. Then you hit your big move, the Nathema ritual. This is where things get seriously grim. You drained your entire planet of all life, every plant, animal, and person, just to fuel your immortality. Think about that for a second. You wiped out everything you knew, everything that could have mattered. You made your homeworld a lifeless husk, a black hole in the Force. That's power on a terrifying scale, but it comes with a price. What price? Well, by killing all life on Nathema, you also destroyed the Force's natural balance there. The planet became a void. No living Force energy, no connection to the wider galaxy. You're the only thing left, existing in this eerie vacuum where even Force users can't sense a thing. And in exchange for this gift of immortality, you gave up so much. You stopped aging, sure, but you also stopped really living. No food, no sleep, no rest, just an endless hunger, a constant need to consume others to stay alive. You became a creature of pure survival, a walking paradox, immortal yet dependent on draining life from everyone else. And even the strongest Force users felt the weight of that void, that emptiness radiating from you. Sounds like the ultimate power move, but being isolated like that, with no one to trust, no one to connect with, that sucks. You don't rule for glory or conquest anymore. You rule because not ruling would be even worse. And it's not like you can take a vacation or a mental health day. Your existence is a constant battle just to keep going. That's the real curse, immortality, without joy, without meaning, just endless existence. But that's just the start. Next up is the rise of the Sith Empire, your transformation from that isolated ruler into the Emperor who enslaved thousands, manipulated entire galaxies, and created legacies that would last centuries. And yeah, managing thousands of Sith apprentices sounds like a nightmare, but trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. Alright, so you've survived the whole kill your dad and drain your planet of life phase. That's a solid start, but you're Darth Vitiate now, Emperor of the Sith Empire. You're not just sitting on a throne sipping space cocktails. No, you've got an entire galaxy to manage, and that comes with headaches that no amount of dark side power can fix. First off, running an empire is exhausting. You've got thousands of Sith apprentices to keep in line, a sprawling bureaucracy that's probably more complicated than the Death Star's wiring, and endless wars to wage. You might think, surely with all this power, things should be easy. Nope, it's more like herding womp rats. Ever tried herding womp rats? Exactly. Each Sith apprentice thinks they're the next big thing. They want your attention, your approval, or your destruction. Your entire court is basically a daily episode of Who's Plotting Against Me Now? It's like playing chess, except all the pieces are alive, have their own agendas, and a few just really want to poke you with a lightsaber. Keeping that balance requires more than power. It takes patience, which you probably have less of than a nerf herder stuck in a jam-packed cantina. And there's the added pressure of the Republic and Jedi breathing down your neck. The eternal struggle between light and dark means you're constantly on the defensive, always planning 10 steps ahead. You can't just show up and say, "Hey guys, I'm the Emperor now, let's be cool." No, you have to deal with spies, assassins, Jedi Knights on your tail, and sometimes your own Sith allies turning on you because, well, they want your job. Now let's talk about your connection to the Force. You're powerful, no doubt. Some would say one of the most powerful Sith Lords to ever exist. But that power comes with a cost. Your connection to the dark side is so intense, so overwhelming, that it's more like carrying a cosmic migraine than a source of strength. Imagine having a supercharged brain all the time, buzzing with dark energy that never lets you rest. That's your reality. Then there's the whole body situation. After centuries of vampiric energy sucking and dark rituals, your original body couldn't keep up. So you started swapping into new bodies to stay alive. That's a neat trick, but it's got its own downsides. Changing bodies means adjusting to new flesh, new limitations, and the constant risk that the new body might reject you, or that someone might find a way to cut your soul loose from its new cage. And sure, you're technically immortal, but you're still vulnerable. One good strike, one well-planned Jedi strike, or Republic attack, and you could be gone. So you spend centuries building traps, armies, and dark rituals to keep yourself safe. The amount of time and energy spent on self-preservation is staggering. You'd think that someone with your power could relax, but nope, you're basically the galaxy's most paranoid immortal. Speaking of paranoia, that's another thing. When you live for thousands of years, you start seeing threats everywhere. Every face could be a spy, every friendly gesture, a trap. You can't even trust your own apprentices fully. The Sith tradition of betrayal means loyalty is a rare and precious commodity. It's lonely at the top, even if the top is an entire Sith empire. Now let's not forget the whole soul-consuming thing. You've been feeding off the life force of entire planets, armies, and individuals just to keep yourself going. It's a weird existence. Imagine constantly needing to drain others' energy just to stay upright. That's not exactly a lifestyle that wins you friends or neighbors. You're less of a ruler and more of a cosmic vampire. And even vampires have their limits. Despite all this, you kept building your empire, pushing the Sith to the edge of galactic domination. But the galaxy doesn't take kindly to being dominated. Wars rage on, Jedi rise and fall, and you're stuck in an endless cycle of conflict and survival. No downtime, no peace, just a never-ending grind. On top of that, your influence sometimes feels less like ruling and more like managing a disaster zone. Empires don't run themselves, and Sith apprentices don't exactly make for reliable governors. It's like trying to juggle with chainsaws. Impressive if you pull it off, but a lot of things could go wrong. You probably think it's all power and glory, but underneath that dark mask, it's a constant balancing act between controlling others and trying not to be controlled by the dark side yourself. There's a reason most Sith don't live long. The constant strain on mind and body is brutal. You're pushing that strain for centuries, and it takes a toll. So here you are, centuries into your reign. You've built an empire that stretches across the galaxy, drained whole planets to fuel your immortality, and survived countless assassination attempts. Sounds like a dream, right? Well, not quite. At this point, your legacy is as much a burden as it is a source of power. You're the ultimate Sith Lord, but that comes with a catch, namely your own ambition and the weight of your past mistakes. You remember that moment when you tried to wipe out the entire Republic and Jedi Order with your full power during the Great Galactic War? Yeah, that didn't exactly go as planned. Even with all your strength and cunning, the galaxy pushed back harder than you expected. The Jedi, the Republic, and even your own Sith had plans of their own. Wars dragged on longer than you liked, and each conflict chipped away at your empire's resources. Managing an empire that's constantly at war means dealing with endless logistics, shifting alliances, and keeping morale up. Not exactly the glamorous life you probably imagined when you first took the throne. Plus, there's the personal toll. Living for so long, you've seen allies turn into enemies, and enemies become legends. You've outlived friends, apprentices, even entire civilizations. That kind of longevity can make even the strongest Sith feel a bit isolated. Imagine being the galaxy's most feared Dark Lord, but secretly wondering who, if anyone, will remember you when you're gone. Then there's the matter of your own physical form. The centuries of dark side rituals and life-draining techniques have left you less than human. You're more spirit than flesh at this point, a shadow lurking behind a throne. That might sound cool if you're into being a cosmic horror, but it also means you've lost the simple pleasures of life, like a good meal or a decent night's sleep. Instead, you're stuck in a near-immortal state that's more curse than blessing. And don't forget your apprentices. You've trained many Sith over the years, but teaching the next generation is tricky when everyone wants your power. Every apprentice is a potential usurper, and watching them scheme while you try to maintain control is exhausting. You have to constantly be 2 steps ahead, balancing encouragement with intimidation. It's like trying to babysit a group of toddlers who all happen to have deadly force powers and a grudge against you. The dark side itself is both your weapon and your prison. It grants you incredible power, but it also feeds on your fears and paranoia. The longer you hold on to it, the more it consumes you from within. You can't relax or let your guard down, because if you do, the dark side's hunger might just swallow you whole. It's a never-ending cycle that's as exhausting as it is dangerous. In the end, being Darth Vitiate means being caught in a constant struggle, not just against the galaxy, but against yourself. Your quest for ultimate power has made you nearly invincible, but it's also trapped you in a role where loneliness, suspicion, and the weight of your empire never really go away. You might be the most powerful Sith ever, but that power comes at a cost that's hard to ignore. So if you ever thought being the Emperor of the Sith was all about dominating the galaxy and wielding unstoppable power, think again. It's also about endless battles, constant vigilance, and a loneliness that stretches across centuries. Not exactly the retirement plan most of us would choose. Alright, so let's talk about Snoke, the big mystery man who suddenly showed up leading the First Order, playing puppeteer to Kylo Ren, and generally making everyone wonder, who is this guy and why does he look like he's been through a blender? You might think being the supreme leader of a galactic empire sounds like a sweet gig, but trust me, it came with its own unique headaches. First off, Snoke's background is as foggy as a Dagobah swamp. Unlike the classic Sith Lords, who had clear origins or well-documented histories, Snoke was this shadowy figure that basically popped up out of nowhere. The galaxy didn't even know where to put him on the map. That in itself is kind of a problem. You want to inspire fear and loyalty, but people are mostly confused about your origin story. It's hard to be intimidating when half the galaxy is shrugging and asking, wait, who exactly are you again? From what we do know, Snoke wasn't just some random dark side user. Some legends suggest he might have been created or manipulated by Palpatine himself, a sort of puppet to keep the dark side's chaos going after Palpatine's death. Imagine living your whole life, or unlife if you will, being a backup plan. That's not exactly a confidence booster. And here's the kicker. Being a mysterious figure with immense power comes with a lot of isolation. Snoke was a leader, but not exactly one you'd want to grab a drink with. He had immense power in the Force, but he was also fragile in some ways. Physically, he looked pretty beaten up. Scars, weird disfigurements. You don't get to relax or be casual when your body looks like it's a permanent before photo in a Sith horror story. Managing the First Order wasn't a walk in the park either. The First Order was basically the Empire's stubborn sequel, trying to live up to the terrifying legacy of Darth Vader and Palpatine. Snoke had the job of rallying war veterans, fanatical soldiers, and a galaxy still recovering from war to believe in his cause. That meant playing politics, dealing with egos, including Kylo Ren's, and keeping the whole machine running. Leadership is stressful, even when you have the Force on your side. And Kylo Ren, oh boy Kylo, mentoring someone as unstable and hot-headed as Kylo Ren was a full-time job. Snoke had to deal with Kylo's anger issues, his doubts, and his ongoing struggle to fully embrace the dark side. It's like being a strict coach to a star player who keeps missing practice. You want them to be great, but they also might throw a tantrum and wreck the locker room. Snoke's patience was definitely tested more than once. The Force connection between Snoke and Kylo was complicated too. Snoke was powerful but not invincible, and Kylo was constantly both learning from him and trying to break free. That's a tough dynamic to manage. You want control but also need to inspire loyalty, which is tricky when your apprentice has daddy issues. Literally. The whole thing was a delicate balance of power and manipulation, so if you're imagining Snoke's life as supreme leader, it's a mix of mystery, power, and pressure. You're the big boss, but you're also haunted by questions about your own identity and constantly battling a messy apprentice. Not to mention, you're running an empire that's basically a reboot of something everyone thought was done and dusted. It's like being the star of a sequel that nobody asked for, trying to prove you're just as scary as the original. In a way, Snoke's story shows that being a powerful dark side user doesn't automatically mean you're living the dream. You get all the perks, immense force powers, command over armies, influence across star systems, but you also get the headaches, loneliness, physical frailty, and dealing with unpredictable apprentices. And all that mystery about where you came from just adds another layer of, why am I even here? So yeah, being Snoke was complicated, powerful, but vulnerable, feared but misunderstood, supreme leader, but never quite in control. And that's just the first part of the story. There's more to unpack about how all that played out with Kylo Ren and the First Order, but we'll get to that next. Alright, so now you're deep in it. You've got your gold robe on, sitting up in your floating throne like you're the galaxy's ultimate chess master. You've been pulling strings for years, built the First Order from the shadows, turned Kylo Ren into your personal project, and kept the Resistance on edge. But here's the catch. Everything you've built, it's starting to fall apart and you don't even realize how bad it is until it's too late. Let's talk about that throne room, because wow, what a setup. Red walls, elite Praetorian guards, Kylo and Rey standing before you. You're feeling confident, too confident. You're so sure that Kylo is still under your thumb, that everything is going according to your plan. You even start monologuing. Classic mistake. You're reading Kylo's thoughts, narrating his intent, acting like you've already won. But here's the twist. You misunderstood what he was really about to do. That lightsaber next to you, it's not for Rey, it's for you. And just like that, boom, cut in half mid-sentence. After all the manipulation, all the planning, all the posturing, you get taken out like a guy who forgot to check his rear-view mirror. The moment Kylo activated that saber and sliced you in half, everything came crashing down. It wasn't even a grand battle. No Force lightning showdown, no backup plan, no secret escape. You were so wrapped up in your own sense of control that you didn't even see the betrayal coming. It was quick, brutal, and honestly, kind of embarrassing. But let's back up a little, because this ending didn't come out of nowhere. It was baked in from the start. You built an empire dependent on fear, but fear doesn't equal loyalty. You didn't have the tight grip Palpatine had over his apprentices. You didn't give Kylo purpose. You just kept poking his insecurities like a Sith therapist with zero empathy. You wanted him broken, so he'd stay under your rule. But all that did was make him unstable and dangerous for you. And here's where things get even messier. After your death, the galaxy doesn't even really react. You disappear, and within a few scenes, Palpatine's back and everyone finds out you were just a puppet all along. Yeah, turns out you weren't even your own guy. You were created, engineered by Palpatine to be the front man of a bigger operation. That floating tube full of Snoke clones on Exegol, that was your origin. You were essentially a placeholder with a fancy chair. So let's put that in perspective. You went from mysterious, all-powerful dark side master to failed experiment in a jar. That's rough. Imagine building an entire empire, mentoring the next Sith hopeful, running half the galaxy, only to find out your entire existence was someone else's contingency plan. You never had true agency, and the moment your usefulness ended, so did you. Just another tool on Palpatine's workbench. And look, from the outside, it's easy to joke about the whole thing. Your supreme leader voice, your weirdly long fingers, your obsession with mind-probing Rey like a creepy HR manager with force powers. But when you really think about it, being Snoke kind of sucked. You weren't the mastermind, you were the mask. A decoy who didn't even know he was a decoy. Also, let's not ignore that your plan to turn Kylo Ren and destroy Luke Skywalker did technically fail on both fronts. Luke became more powerful in death than you could have imagined. And Kylo Ren? He ended up saving Rey and ditching the whole dark side identity completely. So yeah, even your legacy fell apart before the credits rolled. So here's your conclusion. You were created in a lab, dropped into a galactic power vacuum, micromanaged a drama-prone apprentice, underestimated everyone around you, and got split in half by your own favourite lightsaber. And when the dust settled, nobody even really talked about you again. Tough break. So, you want to know why it sucked to be Kylo Ren? Let's start at the beginning, because his story is not your typical rise to power tale. Actually, it's more like a complicated family drama, with galaxy-wide consequences. First off, you're born Ben Solo, the son of Leia Organa and Han Solo. Your mum is basically galactic royalty and a legendary rebel leader. Your dad is a smuggler-turned-hero with a reputation, and your uncle is Luke Skywalker, the Jedi who brought balance to the Force once upon a time. Now, being a Skywalker descendant isn't exactly an easy thing. The Force runs strong in your blood, which means the expectations are sky high. You're supposed to be this next big thing, the Jedi hopeful who's going to keep the peace, or maybe tip the scales toward the light. But as you grow, there's always that shadow hanging over you, the legacy of Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader. And even if you don't want to follow that path, people keep reminding you about it. Kylo's early years are defined by training with Luke, but here's where things start to go sideways. Instead of feeling inspired, you feel isolated. Luke senses something dark inside you which makes him cautious. You're left to wrestle with your feelings alone, which isn't the best for someone struggling with identity and emotions as intense as his. And it doesn't help that the galaxy is still recovering from war, so there's no room for mistakes. Every slip-up feels like it could destroy everything. Then there's that fateful night when everything falls apart. You end up turning on your uncle, attacking him, and burning down the Jedi Temple. That's a heavy weight to carry around, feeling like you betrayed your family, your mentors, and yourself. It's the moment that seals your path to becoming Kylo Ren, a dark side apprentice under Snoke's tutelage. But becoming Kylo Ren isn't exactly a dream come true. You're expected to live up to Darth Vader's legacy, yet you don't fully embrace the dark side, and it clearly torments you. You're caught between wanting to prove yourself and the constant pull back toward the light. It's like being stuck on a roller coaster that only goes up and down, and you're not sure when it's going to stop. And then there's Snoke. He's supposed to be your master, guiding you to greatness. But in reality, he's more of a manipulative figure who keeps you on edge. Instead of nurturing you, Snoke plays on your insecurities and keeps you in line through fear and control. You're never quite sure if you're the apprentice or the pawn. That's gotta mess with anyone's head. Also, don't forget the pressure of leading the First Order. You're not just dealing with personal demons. You're supposed to be the big bad guy leading a military regime that's trying to crush the resistance. That's a lot of responsibility for someone still figuring out who they really are. Finally, there's the complicated relationship with Rey. She's a mirror to your conflicted soul, part light, part dark, and you can't help but be drawn to her. But that connection only adds to your turmoil. You want to defeat her, yet you're fascinated by her. You want to rule, yet you want to be understood. It's a messy internal struggle playing out on a galactic stage. So when you add it all up, being born into a legendary family, living with impossible expectations, struggling with identity, betrayed mentors, a manipulative master, leading an oppressive regime, and a complicated love-hate relationship, you start to see why being Kylo Ren was anything but easy. If you ever thought being a villain meant just wearing a cool mask and wielding a red lightsaber, think again. If it makes you feel any better, he probably had some bad hair days too. You are haunted by his own failures. Remember when he killed his father, Han Solo? That was supposed to be the moment where he fully commits to the dark side. But instead of feeling powerful and unstoppable, it left him feeling more lost. He thought killing Han would free him, but it didn't. It just added to the pile of regrets and doubts he carried. Imagine trying to sleep at night, knowing you hurt the one person who loved you unconditionally. Finally, there's the weight of expectation versus reality. Kylo Ren's story, it's a complicated tale of someone who wanted to be great, but kept getting pulled back by his own humanity. And that's why it sucked to be him. You're always fighting yourself, your past, and everyone else's judgment. It's exhausting. You've lived through the highs and lows, the struggles with identity, power, and loyalty. Now it's time to see how it all wraps up, and why even the ending wasn't exactly a victory lap. By the time Kylo Ren reaches his final act, things have changed quite a bit. The internal battle you've been fighting for so long, the fight between darkness and light, finally comes to a head. You're not just a Sith wannabe anymore. You're faced with real choices, real consequences. The galaxy isn't just a playground for your frustrations anymore. It's the place where your legacy will be decided. The big turning point is when you drop the Kylo Ren persona and step back into being Ben Solo. That's a massive shift. You finally admit, at least to yourself, that the darkness wasn't the answer, that maybe the light side and who you really are is worth fighting for. That moment isn't some grand cinematic redemption with fireworks and a triumphant soundtrack. It's quieter, more human. When you look at Ben Solo's return, it's clear that the past still haunts you. There's no instant fix for all the mistakes, the pain caused, or the trust lost. But it's a start. Choosing to stand with Rey and fight alongside the Resistance isn't about wiping the slate clean. It's about doing better going forward. It's messy and imperfect, just like real life. Then comes the final confrontation against Emperor Palpatine. This is where Ben really steps up. Not as a Sith, not as a villain, but as a hero in his own way. He sacrifices himself to save Rey, completing his arc from conflicted villain to someone who made peace with himself. It's not about grand speeches or dramatic last words. It's a quiet, powerful choice that shows he's finally accepted who he is. But here's the thing, even that ending wasn't easy. It meant letting go of the anger, the hate, and all the power struggles that defined you for so long. It meant accepting vulnerability. That's not what most Sith do. Kylo Ren's story is unique because it shows how complicated being the bad guy can be. So yeah, it sucked to be Kylo Ren. Not just because of the external battles or the galaxy-wide wars, but because of the internal war he fought every day. And in the end, the hardest part was choosing who he wanted to be, not just what others expected. If you're ever feeling overwhelmed or stuck between what people expect and who you want to be, maybe take a page out of Ben Solo's book. It's never too late to try and change the story. So, after looking at all these Sith, you might be wondering, why did it suck so much to be one of them? I mean, on the surface, it sounds cool. Power, control, fear. The Sith get to wield incredible force abilities, command legions, and plot galaxy-changing moves. But dig a little deeper, and it turns out being a Sith is more like signing up for a never-ending headache with a side of existential dread. First off, the whole Sith deal comes with a massive built-in problem, trust issues. The Sith rule of two wasn't just a catchy phrase. It meant that your master is probably plotting to kill you, and you're probably plotting to kill your master. It's basically the galaxy's most intense workplace rivalry, except with lightsabers. You can't just relax and focus on the big picture, because there's always this looming threat from the person who's supposed to be your mentor. That kind of paranoia makes it hard to ever fully let your guard down, or your emotions for that matter. And speaking of emotions, the Sith are supposed to be fueled by passion, right? Anger, hatred, ambition, those are your fuel. But that's also a double-edged lightsaber. Being driven by negative emotions means you're almost constantly in turmoil. Instead of calm control, you get raging storms inside you, and that makes clear thinking a challenge. Imagine trying to run a galactic empire while your mood swings could probably power a starship's hyperdrive. Then there's the problem of identity. Many Sith struggle with who they really are underneath all the dark robes and menacing masks. Take Kylo Ren or Darth Revan, for example. Their stories show how hard it is to stay evil when a part of you wants something different, redemption, peace, or just to be understood. carrying around that internal conflict isn't exactly a recipe for happiness. The Sith lifestyle also involves a lot of losing things that matter. Family, friends, and sometimes even yourself. The quest for power often means cutting off connections and burning bridges because attachments are weakness. But that just leaves a lot of lonely nights and a creeping sense that you're chasing a goal that might never satisfy you. Oh, and let's not forget the physical toll. Sith battles can be brutal. Constant duels, betrayals, and wars put you at risk all the time. Plus, many Sith have to deal with injuries, scars, or worse. Darth Vader's life, after his transformation, is a perfect example. An armoured shell to keep him alive, but a prison that robbed him of so much else. The pursuit of power comes with a serious price tag. And here's a bit of irony for you. The Sith often end up as the underdog to the Jedi, despite all their power and scheming. Jedi have the numbers, the moral high ground, and usually better teamwork. Sith often face defeat, exile, or death, sometimes by their own hand or their apprentices. It's like trying to win a marathon while constantly tripping over your own shoelaces. So yeah, the Sith might seem glamorous from a distance, but living that life is anything but. It's a constant battle, outside and inside. If you're thinking about signing up to be a Sith, maybe think twice. It's a path filled with loneliness, danger, and a lot of second guessing. But hey, if you want to rule the galaxy and don't mind the drama-free headache, go ahead. Just don't say I didn't warn you.